Dearly redheaded, we are choosing consciousness today to get through this thing called grief. Interesting word, grief. It means love, which makes for a mighty good joke. But I'm here to tell you, there's nothing else. Just joy. And if the big picture tends to bring you down, go crazy once your life goes. Woo!
Round two. Let me just say fuck, cock, cunt, because I feel like I'm going to develop Tourette's if I don't get it out of me. It keeps me nimble. I have to think about unbelievable things to keep the brain nimble. And I would share them. I will share them eventually. But I mentioned dissociation. I learned, and I've been hijacking, and I plan to hijack him in the next podcast this morning. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Dr. Andrew Huberman. He does the Huberman Lab. I have never been more jealous of who someone interviews in all my life. He is a, what the fuck is he? He's got, I'm not even going to try. He's affiliated with Stanford. He has a Huberman Lab. I always say, if it resonates, go there. I'm not trying to suggest. In fact, I looked him up, and I don't know if it's fake or what, but he either does or doesn't have a little issue with dating multiple women, and they all caught on. So it's that was the funniest fucking part of researching him. So he needs a sapiosexual roasting. Very smart man that needs a sapiosexual roasting. But I digress. So one of the men that he had on, and this I want to talk about next week, not this week, but it's a lead-in to what I want to talk about this week, is he talked to a man named Dr. Allan Schore. Allan Schore is affiliated, I believe, with UCLA, and he has done a lot of research on attachment. And the reason why that was so intriguing to me is the most, and I hate to say dysfunctional, but the most challenging type of attachment. And I'm trying to remember what the good attachments were. That doesn't matter. I'll talk about it next week. But the one that is most challenged is children that dissociate. So I really want to talk about dissociation today and unresolved trauma that they are finally, and I mean fucking finally, this has pissed me off for a long time, linking to, guess what? Dementia. And my mom had dementia, and she was a fawner. There's fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It's hard for me to give you the background on what those things mean. I'm making the assumption you've probably heard of fight or flight. In Pete Walker's CPTSD book that I've referenced before, he goes into freeze and fawn. My mother was a fawner. She taught me how to fawn. Essentially placate. You can read about it if it appeals. I just learned to placate people, and my own needs became, as strong as I was, as opinionated I was, I would shoot my opinion out there, would get shot down, and I'd start to fawn right away. That's all I had ever known from childhood on to basically feel safe and get what I needed. So when this article came out, Missing My Tissues, I couldn't have been more happy. And I also love when I'm thinking about things and then somebody else fucking writes about it so I don't have to write about it. And this came out, a woman by the name of Chael Champion put this out in 2024. and she references, well, the title of it is, Do Unresolved Trauma and Dementia Have a Link? And she references a person that I have since contacted about coming on the podcast. It's challenging to say, hey, I'm a filthy, dirty comedian, and hey, you want to talk about real shit? But that's hopefully my appeal. First thing the author says is if the person has difficulty accepting that an event happened, they may also quickly experience denial as a coping mechanism to manage overwhelming emotions or reality. That's basically dissociation, which is different from dissociation, but they're related enough. But I mean dissociation. The impacts of trauma on brain health years after the initial event has taken place are not as well understood. And this is the doctor, a PhD doctor, that has generated new research. Her name is April Thames, Thames. Contacted her about coming on. We'll see. She's a clinical neuropsychologist and professor of psychiatry at the Jane and Terry Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior. She's shed light on the long-term neurological consequences of untreated trauma. There's a risk for individuals with unresolved trauma of down-the-road brain disorders, including dementia. Dementia is a broad term for a decline in cognitive function severe enough to interfere with daily life. It's not a single disease, but a general term that encompasses a wide range, including Alzheimer's. Thames and several of her colleagues have been studying whether individuals with trauma early in life have more risk of developing this cognitive decline as they age. She notes a pattern in coping strategies among those with unresolved trauma. Quote, they tend to check out what we call dissociate. Boom. What do I say? Bang, zoom. Boom. The tendency to dissociate can lead to significant memory issues. Sometimes as people get to that middle age, late 40s, early 50s, they report forgetting pretty significant events that occurred. I do not have, what's it called? My grandmother had dementia. My mother they both had dementia and Alzheimer's. They both lived to a ripe old age. It was Alzheimer's by the time they left the planet. In the case of my mother, she never lost me, but my care for her was insane. I hardly left her. And I kept her in the 40s. Music, dick jokes. I heard her 40s dick jokes, 700 times if I heard them once. In fact, that was one of the things that helped me come back, because I'm going to do a tangent thing that I may not come back from. Throw me a raft.
Okay.
Hospice, fuckers, yes, I said fuckers. Hospice tried to bump my mother out of hospice because she could tell dick jokes in the 40s. They felt, that took a lot of, I forget what the woman said, but I have a dartboard and her face is sort of now muted. But she said something along the lines, that was very complex or complicated, that my mother could tell these dick jokes from the 40s and therefore, she didn't have dementia or Alzheimer's. And I ended up going to bat for the world with dementia, with the director of hospice of the fucking Hudson Valley. And I don't remember the conversation well, but I remember telling him he was wrong, that these people with care and consideration, especially knowing what women's brains in particular have fawned and dissociated from, like I went to bat. I actually, as another aside, with my mother's blessing, which I'm sort of glad at this point it didn't happen, but I really, she was going to be willing to donate her brain because we had done such a good job. And there's a much bigger story. I had She developed dementia when she was around 83. She died when she was 96. It was probably Alzheimer's the last couple of years, depending on who you ask. But long prior, I had done a lot of holistic things. I never put her on any medication because I was very cognizant that the left brain was dying, not the right. The right is the movies, the music, the things that folks can still enjoy. I took away all her tasks. And this ironically relates back to Allan Schore, the doctor I mentioned that I want to talk about next week, because he is one of the only people I've heard give credit back to the left-right brain distinction in childhood and infancy. So I was very particularly interested in why we try to salvage the task-oriented side of the brain that dies when the right brain still has some vigor. Hope that made sense. Hope I am back to sitting in this chair, and I think, my notes are that I didn't even learn, and I mentioned this, I think, in the first podcast, I didn't even learn I was dissociating until I was 54, and that was after my 5-day episode. So if you can imagine how I'm relating it to what I learned about Dr. Schore and what ultimately so many women and men are experiencing with dementia and Alzheimer's, if we don't start to relate that to trauma or dissociation, pick your word. I'm sort of the belief we all have things to work through. We're doing ourselves such a disservice. And these are people that don't get good care. People would say to me they don't know how I listen to my mother say my name 75 times a day. I was just glad it wasn't physical pain, and she had plenty of that, but I was much better at the dementia, Alzheimer's stuff. She watched The Sting the last 2 months of her life probably 50 times. Sorry for the caregiver, but that's where she was, and it didn't faze me. Someday I'll write about that, because I do want to give people patience, but with humor. There was plenty of fucking humor. She would let me put a pillow over her face and pretend I was killing her. There's a lot of that in there. We did a lot of fucked up shit. The findings imply that the impact of early life trauma and adversity can result in lifelong changes that affect the way the brain develops. Changes, she says, that make one potentially vulnerable to dementia in middle and old age. Research published in the journal. By the way, I read because I have no left hemisphere. So I can talk about, if I was having a conversation, it'd be much easier for me. But I read because my left brain, I'm not even sure I have one. I'm waiting for the scan. Research published in the Journal of American Medical Association has noted that individuals with a history of trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, have a heightened risk of cognitive decline. Another study in the British Journal of Psychiatry suggests that childhood trauma is associated with an increased risk of cognitive impairment in later life. These findings build a compelling case for the long-term neurological impact of unresolved trauma. They underscore the importance of treating trauma-related disorders proactively with early intervention and consistent mental health support. What I want to say there, again, as I was 54 before I learned that I was dissociating, Allan Schore, who I'll talk about next week, talks about the right brain, left brain things and dissociation associated with attachment. And we wonder, and I'll get there later today or soon, wondering why we're all estranged and why estrangement between parents and children are on the rise, families, what have you. I never had a therapist ask me about dissociation. I never have had a therapist. Well, in all fairness, yes, the one who taught me at 54, but it took several. And I don't do cognitive therapy. I'm not on the couch in the fetal position anymore. Not that I ever was. But, or talk about our attachment style, which couldn't be more important. What we learn when we're little applies to our romantic relationships. It can't not. Anyway, when Harvard's ready to give me that honorable doctorate, I'll take it. Fuck cock cunt. Understanding and addressing the long-term effects of trauma can help individuals develop healthier coping mechanisms than dissociation and potentially reduce the risk of future cognitive decline. Bang, zoom. Hope you appreciate that. Hope you take away what resonates. I poke around. My brain runs like on high octane all the time, but I spend a lot of time in solitude. I spend a lot of time not thinking, if you can imagine. And I just try to resonate with my higher self, which is where I'm going to go in the third podcast, if you tell me how much time I just used up.
We're at 16 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. That seemed longer to me.
It always does.
Yeah, I guess you're right. So I guess, I as far as resonating with my higher self, I always had intuition. It got squelched. It got derailed. In the time leading up to my mother's death, and I mean long lead, she was 96, going on 97 when she passed. She had lost her sister 6 months prior. My mother basically told me very consciously she was done. And she fully expected me to put a pillow over her face if it fucking came to that. You had to know my mother. You had to know. And it put... Here's a funny sidebar. Years prior... Oh, God, this is going to make me cry. Years prior, I had to have a small surgery. But in the event, I didn't come out of it. I was like, hey, Ma, this is who you're going to next. And she was like, ugh. And I said, well, and she was like, this is what she said to me. I don't want to say anything bad about my siblings. At least right now I don't. But she knew where she was going next. And if my siblings ever listen to that, they're not going to know who this was at this time, because it's not the person that ultimately would have taken her. This was before we planned better. So there, see how I justify myself? So anyway, I said, you're going to go, and that person is pro-nursing home. And my mother never wanted to see the inside of a nursing home. She had watched her stepfather and mother, and, she made me promise never to put her in a nursing home. And I had my line in the sand with Alzheimer's, but she never even came close to it. So it was just never a consideration. She died in my home, our home. Hold on, I'll get it back. So, I told her where she was going. She didn't want to see the inside of a nursing home. So she asked me, I have, my sons are, one in particular is neurologically different. I say that because I want to protect his privacy, but I also want to say that, hell, it's in the family. And my mother asked me, she's like, in the event that I, pass away from this, but small surgery, which, we're planning for something that's not going to happen. She asked me if she was relocated to that other sibling's house, if I would send my son to knock her off. And when I tell you, she meant it. I'm like, and he couldn't drive at the time. I'm like, what do you picture him on a fucking bus coming to you? And like, how do you picture this? But I knew she did. She just, you had to know her. You had to know her. The shit we would talk about. I remember one time we were staging photos of injuries. I had her laying on the steps up to the second floor and pretending like she had fallen. And, we would do some pretty bizarre stuff, but we found it funny. So as we're doing this, my son walks in the door, barely acknowledges what we're doing because he knew there was nobody had really fallen. And he walked by me and goes, "There's something fucking wrong with you." And he kept walking. Oh, I miss her. She was, my built-in date. My favorite person to sit next to at a restaurant bar. Man, we had fun. And inevitably, she would have more drinks purchased for her than I would. Like some man would see her and she would remind them of, their crazy aunt, their mother, their grandmother.
She was at the sweet old lady stage.
No, she was telling dick jokes.
Well, that's sweet old lady stage.
And like maybe 30% of the time they'd buy me a drink. And it was like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, what the fuck? Is this a good ending?
Sure.
All right. You're going to tell me the minutes? Because I'm so fucking fixated on this. You have no idea.
Why?
Because
you have a fixation with the time as if it matters.
We're
doing what we do to get the point across to people.
True, but I picture this poor son of a bitch commuting. And I want to get them home. I don't know. I picture I'm committed to the 30-minute commute. I'm going to have to commit to the 25-minute commute.
This one would be good for somebody with a 22-minute commute, so that's fine.
Hospice. I fought with hospice. They would come in like, Florence Nightingale? They were a help, but they weren't as big of a help as they thought. So I ended up having a few fights. And true story, when they wanted to recertify her, they wanted to quiz her on the Alzheimer's dementia thing, which they do anyway when you have medical insurance to... I do not know of all the things in the world why you have to reinstate having dementia or Alzheimer's and be asked the cognitively cruel questions. So it came to a point where I just said no to the cognitively cruel questions. I said, she's got heart disease. She's got other fucking things that'll fucking kill her. Like, why the fuck do you have to do this? Without the fucks. Maybe one or two. I don't know. And they just assign... with Medicaid, the primary issue with her. And now they're trying to take away her primary issue and thinking, I think they think I was trying to hide it. That was the most annoying part. So anyway, she went through one nurse and they didn't recertify her and they were sending somebody in. This is funny. Let me see if I can tell it. If it made me laugh that pissed off, it's funny. So they send in somebody for a second opinion. And I'm hot. I've got the aide there. I've got a good friend of mine there. I've got my team around me because, I'm going to end up in jail for homicide. It's coming. So and my mother's she's she knows Joe's going to cover it. So she's sitting there and this woman comes in and the woman is petrified of my dogs. Petrified. So I have the dogs behind a fence 10 feet away from her, but they're at the fence because they're very gregarious. So this woman's every, few seconds watching where the dogs are coming from. And she's basically telling me she has got to do this test. And I said, no, you don't. My home, you don't have to do it. It's cognitively cruel. Learn something. I was like, you got to get this. You got to get this. This can't be how you feel about this. So anyway, at one point, she looks over at the dogs, and she said, can he jump the fence? I said, only when I use your name and I tell him to. So, needless to say, she stood up. The nurse who was throwing her under the bus from hospice stood up, and they exited through a different door to avoid the dogs, which was fine. And my mother wasn't recertified for hospice. And so that was fine, and then towards the end, when I needed them, and they're supposed to come back, and I knew she only had a couple days to live, that's a whole nother story I'll tell sometime. So let's say it was a Tuesday, they were going to come on Thursday. That's the whole morphine thing. I'll talk about morphine versus THC another time. They were due on a Tuesday, and then they bumped her till the following Tuesday because they wanted the director to come to meet with me because I had been such a pain in the ass, I guess. And I was like, she's going to be dead. And then she died, and they never came. So, yeah, lawsuit. Anyway, God, if I had time, I should write about that because I have some residual anger.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening and supporting Natural Born Redhead. If you follow the bouncing balls, please like and subscribe. If you know someone interested in sparing others grief and inciting joy, message me on Facebook or reach out via my website, Natural Born Redhead. Jai Ma.